Are you in a time of your life that is really challenging? You're either coming out of a very challenging, difficult time, you've experienced something traumatic and are in the process of getting the help that you need to make positive change, and you are questioning if transformation is actually really possible. And I want you to know two things from this episode. I want you to know that positive change is possible and that God is real. I'm Cathy Jo. I am a certified life coach, registered nurse, and podcast host of the Unplanned Joyful Life and the Joy of Transformation. I am on all listening apps. I have 170 episodes for that you can listen to on the um, audio apps. And I am new to YouTube, and this is my first solo YouTube video. So I just want to say hi. I'm happy to be here. I hope I can support you. And the reason that I know that transformation is possible and that God is real is because of my experience early on in my life, but also later in my life also. And I just want to share with you things that happened in my life that made me realize this. And it wasn't easy, and I experienced some very painful things in the process, but it was through those painful periods and those trials and tribulations that I was able to really get real with my life and find God and make real change. So I just want to start by saying I came from a very loving but dysfunctional family. And I don't say that to throw anybody under the bus. I love my parents, I love my siblings, but the reality of it was that there was some alcoholism, there was some verbal abuse, some emotional abuse, and just kind of neglect that actually came from my parents just not giving themselves the care that they need. Not that it was anything hurtful towards us, but by us taking care of ourselves, we are in a better place to provide support and care to the people that we love. So, if you take anything from this episode today, know it is that yes, you need to take care of yourself. Yes, you are important. And that getting the help that you need, whether it's mental, physical, spiritual, not only are you helping yourself, but you're also helping your family and those closest to you. So, I want to start by an experience that I had that really I think was an inspiration for me and my family. Um, when I got to be into my early teens, my brother and sister were 5 and 6 years older than me, and my brother was experiencing a mental health crisis. And in many dysfunctional families, a lot of the results of that dysfunction tends to show its ugly head, or however you want to say it, in later teens and early 20s when people are becoming adults and living on their own. And this is just something I've learned through my research over the years. And so it's not surprising to know that my brother did have difficulty when he was late teens, early 20s. And I ended up having trouble. And then in some ways, my sister also had trouble, all in different ways. But um, anyway, one of the most inspiring things that I experienced was my parents getting the help that they needed when my brother was suffering from this mental health crisis. And first and foremost, they were getting my brother the help that he needed. But by doing that, they became aware that they also needed help. And so we went for family counseling. My parents went for couples counseling. I'm sure my brother was going to counseling at some point. But it was at a family group counseling session. Actually, there were two. The first one, we were in the counselor's office, and I just felt so excited that truth was being spoken. I was so excited inside. I was excited that like we were getting the help that we needed. And I may have thought that it was going to be easier than it was at that point, but my genuine need for good communication and healing and just all getting the help that we needed, it was very evident. Even as a young girl, I was probably 12 years old at the time. A little bit later, my dad it was kind of like his acknowledgement of his involvement in the dysfunction that came evident when we were at a group family counseling session in our home. And it just seemed the counselor was talking about when there is like a discoordination or a dysfunction within the couple, the married couple. If that doesn't get resolved, then it affects the family almost like a mobile. Like if you've ever seen a baby's mobile, it's got the main part at the top, and then if it's off kilter, everything else kind of gets off kilter. And that's how the counselor explained it to us. And I remember my dad, and I don't know if it was just at that time or if it was over time that he was realizing this, but at the coaching session, he realized that his drinking, even though he wasn't abusive, his dad had been physically abusive to him. And even though he was generally seemed to be like a happy drunk and he always brought home his checks from work, he didn't think that his drinking was affecting our family, but it was. And he acknowledged that and he admitted that. And to hear my dad, who at that time was in his 40s, and then to see the changes that he made after that, it was just so empowering and hopeful and brought me so much joy. It just was like a sigh of relief that my dad did that and that he cared enough about us to acknowledge his part and to want to change. And so that is something happened during family counseling. And I could see and feel differences happening in my family. It took a lot of time, and it still even is happening today. Dysfunctional habits and routines don't just die overnight, but you definitely can experience positive change. And I will share more with you as we go. But I just wanted to share that one first experience to me that really resonated, of the hope of transformation and the possibility of positive change. The second thing that I want to talk about is when I was in my later teens, I met my husband and fell in love. We dated for a couple years, and I ended up getting pregnant unplanned. But I was in a relationship that I truly felt cared for. And I really felt that I loved my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time. And I purposely had waited quite a long time before engaging in sex because I knew how sacred it was and how important it was. And that if I was going to, be sexually involved with anybody, it had to be somebody that I planned on living the rest of my life with, because I knew the consequences. And so we dated for a year and then became sexually active. And after a year of that, I became pregnant. And I want to just back up and say that I was on birth control before I even started, to have sex. But the birth control did not settle well with me at all. It really affected me emotionally, mentally. I cried all the time. My husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, we broke up twice during that time because I just was not myself and I thought it was the relationship. But then once we broke up a second time and I went off of the birth control completely, and I noticed the difference. And when we reconciled and we really decided like that we really wanted to be with each other, I did not use oral birth control. And so a few months later is when we got pregnant. So it was definitely an unplanned pregnancy. I was 19 at the time. I did love my boyfriend, who is my husband now, and we did decide to get married sooner. We thought we would probably go through college, and then after college, we would get married. And so I just really looked at it like it was something that we planned later on. And this was just happening sooner than we planned. It wasn't anything that I felt that anything that I ever questioned, even not choosing life. It was just something that I was pregnant and this was a blessing. And I knew that whether or not my husband was on board with me, I knew that my parents would support me either way and that I could live with them and they definitely would help me and support me. And that's one thing I truly still appreciate about my parents. But my husband did want to, he did want to get married and he did want to have our son together and just plan our life together. So we got married when I was about 3 months pregnant, and I was the healthiest I've ever been in my whole life. It was a very good pregnancy. My doctor was even impressed with me for my age, how well I took care of myself and how well I did as far as gaining weight and the food that I was eating and my activity and everything. And it was like I was on cloud nine. And unfortunately, after I had my son, I went through a period of a few weeks that was still totally wonderful. Breastfeeding seemed to go very well, but I really didn't have help or support from anybody outside, and nobody really in my family had breastfed. So I wasn't aware of the needs of a breastfeeding mom and how much it depletes you and how much you need to make sure that you're getting what you need because you're giving so much mentally, physically, spiritually to the little one that you have. So, at about 6 weeks, I had suffered severe symptoms of postpartum depression. I initially started with anxiety that just kept increasing and increasing and increasing, and it was severe. And then it was followed by a deep depression. And after a lot of research, I know that that is very characteristic of postpartum depression. It's not as there are differences between it and other depressions. But anyway, this depression got so bad, I did need to go and get help. And I went to my OBGYN, and then he referred me to a psychiatrist who prescribed medication, but it would take a couple weeks to kick in. And if I had any trouble, get back to him. And so, about a week in, I really couldn't take the sleeplessness, the fatigue, the extreme anxiety. And it was just a horrible, horrible situation. And even when I ended up calling the doctor back, actually, my mom called for me because I didn't even feel like I could talk to the doctor. He recommended that I go to Bryland, which is a mental health hospital, to get evaluated, which I did. And I was admitted and was treated with medications and also with treatments. And I remember the first night that I was there and I went and undressed to take a shower and I almost didn't even recognize myself. I normally ran about 145 pounds. I was maybe like 135 when I got pregnant, 160 when I had my son. And when I went to the hospital 6 weeks later, I was 128. And if you're normally 145 and you're 128 and you lose that weight so quickly after birth without trying and because you can't sleep and you can't eat, um, I knew that I was where I was supposed to be as hard as it was. My body really needed to recover and I really needed not only medications but treatments. And I'm so glad that I got the help that I needed, as hard as it was to have to leave my newborn and my husband at that time, mostly my newborn, you know. Um, I became a better mom because I got the help that I needed and I was able to provide for him. So I want to say, I wanted to mention the unplanned pregnancy just because that's a part of my experience. And even though I suffered that depression, I was able to get the help that I needed. And that's something that I really want you to know also, if you are dealing with any type of mental health crisis, if you have gotten help and you feel like it's not working and you feel like weak or that you shouldn't need help, I just want to encourage you to please go get the help that you need and just keep asking and keep reaching out until you get what you need. And just want to encourage you to do that. The next thing I want to share with you is the idea of faith, what it is, and how do I get it? That's basically was my experience when I saw how my husband responded. Initially, he didn't know how to act or to support me when I was dealing with anxiety and depression before I was hospitalized, and pretty much nobody around me really did. But once it happened and people realized that this was serious and they got some direction and guidance from the doctor, And also just me being in the hospital, my husband came to visit me daily. And besides working and going to school and then going back to be with our son at night, um, his constant presence and knowing that he was going to be there at the end of the day, it just resonated with me. And it just felt like an unconditional love that I may have witnessed, I may have experienced from my family, but I'm sure from my mom and my dad. But coming from my husband, for some reason, his presence and his unconditional love for me was very significant. And it was something that even in my darkest moment, when I was laying in bed basically 24/7, except to maybe get up and get my medications or maybe to get up and go to the bathroom, um, it just made me feel like he was providing for me his presence at a time where I really couldn't give him anything. And so that was very significant. And then after I came home from the hospital and continued to get counseling, I recovered fairly quickly because I got the help that I needed and because um, the treatment was very, what's the word I'm looking for? This, because the depression was so severe, the treatment had to also be as strong and powerful. And so I spent a week and a half to 2 weeks taking medication that would stabilize that the meds would stabilize in my bloodstream, and then I received electric shock therapy treatments that would knock my brain waves into a better pattern, basically, is a simple way of saying it. I was told that I could possibly need 6 to 8 treatments, but I only needed two, possibly three at the most. But I have a feeling it might have been two. Um, so anyway, the response was very quick, and it was like I went from being dead to being alive again. Basically, the only way that I could really describe that feeling. And so from that point on, it was more feeling anxious about being able to take care of everything that I needed to, and then also dealing with the guilt and shame of having to leave my son to get the help. But as far as the actual depression itself, it actually got resolved fairly quickly. And I did stay on medications for about 6 months afterwards. I believe there were antidepressants, mood stabilizer. I'm not sure what else. Maybe there were 3 medications. And I was a little bit nervous about coming off of them, but I definitely was able to come off of those meds and did fine. Um, so during this time when I came home from the hospital and my husband and I were talking about the experience, I asked him, how did he get through that time? Like, how did he continue to work and go to school and come to see me every night and then also take care of our son when he was home? And he said, my mom just told me to keep my faith. And to me, it just seemed almost too simple and too easy. It seemed too simple and too easy. And so I, um, but I knew what he meant. I knew because I've seen what his life was like and what his home life was like growing up. And from knowing him, it made sense that he had this stability, and his family did practice their Catholic faith every week on holy days, prayed during meals. There wasn't a whole lot of conflict within the family. When there was conflict, it seemed to get resolved. People didn't seem to hold grudges. It didn't seem like there was manipulation going on. So these were all things that I was aware of. And so when he said that very nonchalantly, my mom just told me to keep my faith. I thought, wow, like what I asked, first of all, what is faith? And my second thought was, how do I get that? And so from that conversation, I began to search and research what faith was, what it meant, how can it help us. And I read the book, Who Needs God by Harold Kushner. And I may do an episode on that book and just kind of go over some of the key points that I learned. This was 38 years ago that I read this book. But honestly, it was really life changing for me, and just starting to go to church regularly and just kind of take in and really listen to the words of the Mass, listen to the words of the prayers, look at the not only the statues of the of Jesus, Mary, Joseph, the saints, the Holy Spirit, but also the Stations of the Cross and just the other people that were in Mass, and just kind of take it all in. I'd been Catholic my whole life, but never really practiced. And I just took a couple years to just take it all in and really see if this is something worth investing in. Is this something that could actually really save me from something like this happening again? Another experience that I had during this time of transition was when I attended Trocaire College for a semester. My husband was already working and going to school full time. I was working part time, but I really wanted to pursue nursing because of the experience I had with a nurse who treated me, who took care of me when I was dealing with this depression. And so I was encouraged by the people around me to go, if that's what I felt like I wanted to do, to go. And we got babysitters for our son. And I went for a semester. And I know that that semester was significant because of the classes that I took and where I was at in my life. But I knew after a semester that it was too much for me. I didn't feel comfortable working part time and going to school part time while my husband was gone and having sitters for my son, Steven. So I decided just to work part time. I had a job that was like 3 to 4 hours, Monday through Friday at the hospital. And I was able to spend most of my days with my son and not have him babysat. But while I was at Trocaire, I took courses like English 101, general psychology, and I had to take two courses that were either philosophy or religion. And I chose religion partially because of this quest that I was on regarding my faith. And one was called Introduction to Christianity, and the other one was called World Religions, which I had taken a world religions course in high school before. But the Introduction to Christianity basically was the Nicene Creed broken into chapters and explained every single part. And if you don't know, the Nicene Creed is basically our Catholic Church's statement of faith. If you want to know what Catholics believe, go through the Nicene Creed and read through it, and you will know exactly what we believe as Catholics. So while I was at Trocaire, in my psychology class, I was asked to do a paper presentation at the end of the semester. And she encouraged us to do it on a topic that we wanted to learn about, that we wanted to understand more about. And so I chose postpartum depression. And this was about a year and a half after I had, experienced it and was discharged from the hospital. So a year and a half later, I researched and I did this paper. And what I realized with that was that I wasn't crazy. I can't think of saying it any other way, but when I started to look at the risk factors that people have for postpartum depression, I started to see all these things that were present in my life. And it just made me realize that, oh my gosh, I'm not crazy. Like, when you have like 7 out of 10 things that they say will put you at risk and it happens to you, you're kind of like, oh, it makes sense. Like, I would almost be surprised if it didn't happen to me. And just off the top of my head, some of the things were an early or late pregnancy. So either being a young mom or an older mom, that was one risk factor. Another one was a significant amount of changes within a short amount of time. And that was definitely, I graduated from high school, went to college, got pregnant, got married, had my son. So it was just definitely a lot of changes within even like a 2 year period. Another was limited support system. And I felt like because our marriage was new and my in-laws didn't really know me very well at the time, and my family was dealing with so much already, that I don't think that my family was able to support me emotionally the way that I needed it. And I don't think that my in-laws were either. I don't know if I don't really know why or where they stand. After the depression, everybody kind of kicked in, and there was much more support and much more involvement on both sides of the family. But anyway, there was definitely a lack of support. Even friends that I was close to, one had moved to Alaska with her new husband, another one was away at college. So lots of changes and lots of minimal support. Another is depression in your family. And my brother was going through a depression at the time. So very realistic, very understandable. One of the things I did realize with the aspect of depression and nature versus nurture is sometimes we assume that because depression runs in our family that we are going to have depression. But just remember that part of that is also the support system is the same or similar. If you're coming from the same family, there may be practices in the family that put you at risk. If there's poor communication, if there's poor support, if there's a lot of yelling and screaming and fighting and discord, those things can also put you at risk of depression. So just because somebody in your family is suffering depression doesn't mean that you're doomed. Just so you know, you do have some control. And so just kind of be aware of that. Some people definitely have, chemical imbalances. I truly believe that. And some people definitely need to be on medications their whole life or need certain types of care or support. But I just want you to know that just because there is depression in your family doesn't mean that you're going to suffer depression. And even though you've suffered depression before, doesn't mean that you're going to suffer it again, especially something that could be more of a one-time crisis type of issue. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. The next thing that I wanted you to know is that after I was researching the faith, going to church regularly, trying to come to terms with this guilt and shame that I was experiencing, I was really looking for other people that were part of the faith that could tell me that it's going to be okay. I wanted people to tell me what the answer was going to be. Is this something that I'm going to experience on and off my whole life? Am I going to have to leave my family every so often to go into the hospital? Am I doomed to this, basically? Or is there hope that maybe this was a one-time experience and I could be normal again? And the only thing that I could see that really was going to make a significant change or be some type of true proactive practice was practicing the faith and getting to know Jesus on a personal level and surrendering to him and the will that he had for me on my life. And so I realized that the first time I got depressed, nobody was able to save me from it. Nobody was able to take it away. Nobody was able to say the right thing. And so if I needed to get help, I would. But if there was a way that I could prevent it, if I could make changes in my life, make changes in my habits in which I lived, even in my relationships and how I communicated, how I took care of myself. If there was anything that I could do to prevent another occurrence, I wanted to do it. And after spending a couple years delving into the Catholic faith, I knew in my heart that if there was any hope, it was going to be through Jesus Christ, and it was going to be through practicing my faith on a regular basis. So, I wanted to share that with you because at the time I really wanted there to be somebody to tell me, yes, change is possible. Yes, Jesus is real. Yes, he can save you. He can make your life better. And I had very few people in my life that were doing that, even people that were practicing, and I could see the positive practice in their life. They weren't even comfortable with talking about it, which I think is a real issue in the Catholic faith, but I do think that it's improving. But that's part of the reason why I've always wanted to communicate this experience to other people, because I never want somebody to be in the place that I was in and feel hopeless and to think that there wasn't a chance that they could recover, that there wasn't hope that they could really make positive change in their life. Because I truly experienced it. And I just want you to know if you or somebody that you love is suffering, is dealing with a lot, you really feel like you're in a very bad place and you don't know where to turn, I just want to reassure you that positive change and transformation is possible and God is real. If you could please subscribe to this show, I really want to get this message out to as many people as possible. If you are interested in a clarity coaching call, you can contact me at kathylang716@gmail.com. And I will have a link in the show notes where you can go ahead and sign up for a clarity coaching call for you. 30 minutes to let kind of what coaching is, what it's about. And if you feel like you're interested or in need of it, I would be happy to serve you. Thank you so much for listening today. May God bless you. And I just want to share one more thing. There is a scripture verse from, let me see if I can find it. Hold on. Um, it's from John, and I'm not 100% of the scripture verse, but it says, therefore, if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. And I have this beautiful picture in my room that my mom had purchased for me years later. And I guess if I could summarize this podcast episode anyway, I would say, therefore, if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. So please put your trust in Jesus and he will provide for you. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. And don't forget to subscribe.